Hey everybody, welcome back to another gaming ideas video. Now, to go along with the horror theme, we're going to be talking about Resident Evil, one of my favorite franchises ever. Next to Devil May Cry, it's one of my favorite Capcom franchises. I apologize for this video being very late and there's a lack of uploads. These do take so much time, sorry. But please check out the other videos on the channel. But these videos are meant as like my ideas and stuff, so I wanted to approach how I would have done Resident Evil 8, because as someone who really likes this franchise, and I have done videos on Devil May Cry, so from Devil May Cry 3, 2, and 5 Special Edition, please check those out, thank you. I wanted to do a video a little bit different, pivot to another Capcom franchise that I really enjoy, Resident Evil. Now, as a fan of the series, I had to be in a different mindset when writing the script for this video, or being in a different mindset, period, when coming up for ideas with this video. Because Resident Evil 8 does have a lot of problems, mainly being a first-person RE4 clone. Now, I know there's the diehards that love anything that Capcom does, and then there's the other people that are OGs that hate some of the things that they're doing. I know I'm not going to please everyone with this video. I'm fully aware of that, but these videos are meant for fun, just for my ideas, and that's really about it. So if you disagree, agree, all that jazz, it's perfectly fine. Just sit back and enjoy.
So the main flaws with RE8 is not just the fact that it is an RE4 clone, but also it has a lot of pacing problems, a lot of inconsistencies with its story, and it's a direct follow-up from RE7, which was complete survival horror, while this is almost too actiony. And with the enemy types, like the Lycans, which I genuinely enjoy, I feel like there's a lot of room to really improve the RE7 formula with a bit of action and stuff like that. With Lady Dimitrescu as one of the central antagonists and a lot of other things with the game, which I'll get into her and the different sections of the game soon, because the map and the village are really all over the place, especially when you play the game. It just feels very disconnected compared to RE4 and stuff like that. Now, there's elements of gameplay that I feel could be tweaked or maybe overhauled to be more survival horror based and then become a little bit more action based towards the tail end of the game. And then when you go into a separate save file, it starts to when you do another difficulty, it starts to get a little bit mixture of survival horror and action. Kind of like when you play Madhouse difficulty in Resident Evil 7. It's very chaotic and it's very sporadic and stuff like that. But regardless of that, let's get into how to improve the game. The first improvement, I would say, is to make it more survival horror based and then slowly give us more action elements later on. Now, that's going to sound a little bit weird, but in some regards, RE4 Remake proves that you can mix a lot more survival horror into an action formula. Now, I know a lot of people have their flaws with that game, and a lot of people don't like it as much, but I feel like with this game, there's a lot of elements I would tweak or outright overhaul to make it a lot better. Now, I like some changes that they did implement, and I do like certain characters, but with the map being very sporadic, it feels very disjointed, you don't know what you're doing sometimes, and certain elements of the game feeling very, very dumb, and a lot of cut content with the game. I feel like, not to mention, they did cut a lot of sections of the game. There's room to improve. So, first improvement is we are bringing back the backpack system, and we are also going to keep the attaché case, but we're going to access that feature near the middle of the game as an improved version of the backpacks that gives you, it would function a little bit differently, but it would have a similar function that we have in RE8. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, the whole reason they got rid of the backpack system is to make way for the attaché case. Yes, I'm fully aware, but I do want to tweak the attaché case where it's not as RE4-like and more like limited in some way, where when you do get it, it's a massive improvement over the backpack. backpacks, where it feels still limited, but it's your final backpack, so to speak. Some of the mechanics would roughly stay the same. Ethan would have a bit of a personality, but the story would be the massive overhaul that I would do and slightly change or tweak. But I might get into that in a separate video, so let me know in the comments if you guys want to see a complete rewrite of this story, and yeah. Now, the reason why I personally like 7 is that the function of horror is that it has 3 separate sections, each focusing on a different type of horror with each individual family member. With this game, they really didn't do that. Now, a lot of people complained that 7 was too scary. A lot of people also complained that it wasn't. So, with this, I would genuinely want to make the game scary, because most of the time, it doesn't feel scary. It feels very, what's the word? Corny, stupid, dumb at times. And no disrespect to the people that like it, you're allowed to like it, but I genuinely had a lot of problems with it. And I know that there's the purists out there, they can stay in their little bubble. The first overhaul that I would do is the castle section. Now, this is the section of the game that I felt deserved a lot more. Because going from the concept art, Lady D was supposed to be a central antagonist or focus in her divide section. And we really... The castle feels very rushed in some regards. It doesn't feel very big. So... the first overhaul is I would make it a lot bigger. It would kind of look like this. Now, this is just a prototype. I would add a lot more to it, but there would be a lot more levels, and I was taking a lot of influence from Resident Evil 2 Remake with how I would approach the castle, and also RE4 Remake. The castle would be a massive overhaul. It would be filled with layers, up, down, all around type stuff. This would be the Jax type of section of the game, the slasher horror. Now, it would also feature historic, vampiric, and bug-like horror because of the daughters, and it would slightly be a little bit tweaked in some regards. Now, with the castle being a lot bigger, there would be a lot more room for puzzles and a lot more gameplay opportunities. And also, yes, we would be giving some more, a lot more enemy types. But regards to the daughters, they would be locked into certain sections of the castle. Now, let's get into the most interesting change that I would make, is that the daughters would function like the the stalkers of that section of the castle, or certain parts of it. And if you think you're safe in the save rooms, you're not. Because of the fact they are bugs, I like the idea of basically them flying under the save room doors and making things a lot harder for you. I even thought of a cutscene with the Duke interacting with you, and one of the daughters comes in, and you have to book it out of there and try to find a way to slow her down. The windows, like in RE2, have more functionality. Instead of boarding them up, you have to sometimes break them, letting cold air in to basically keep certain sections free of the daughters, because that air would get to their bug form and slowly slow them down. You do have the option not to even kill them or fight them, because this is something I was pulling from Resident Evil 3, is more of a choice like fight or flight in a sense. Now, that sounds dumb when you think about it, but I like the idea of a choice system that really matters in a way that Resident Evil 7 had, but didn't really do it justice the way the original games did. The way that each section of the castle would have each daughter, Lady D would start to roam around the castle a lot more. You would have more interactions with her, and she would wound you a lot. But each daughter would, stalk you in a different way, and sometimes if you have a mini boss fight with them, each one would be distinctly different and a little less automated. Now, if you've been opening up the different windows, they would be very weakened. So when you would get them in a certain corner of the castle or a certain room to fight them, it would be a lot harder, or like a lot more easier and a lot harder for them to try to kill you. And with each daughter you kill, Lady D would start to be a lot more, actively hunting you down, less emphasis on using another daughter. And then if you start to kill more than one, then it gets even harder and harder. So that's something I want to emphasize, is that Lady D starts to become more of a threat and becomes that Jack type figure in the castle. She actively nearly kills you multiple times, and that's something I want to emphasize and mess around with. And yes, you do have the option not even to kill her daughters, and like you can try to avoid them at all costs, not even do certain things, but I want there to be a lot more player choice and a lot more puzzles to mess around with it. Stuff that the castle really didn't have a lot. And actually, Under DeMeo actually brought up a brilliant point that I actually agree with, is that there wasn't really a lot of puzzles in the castle, and I feel like this would be a good time to really emphasize that, police station, Baker House mix that the castle has. And I also want to emphasize that you can see Lady D have conversations with her daughter still, but you can also see the daughters in their unique sections doing distinct things, killing people or killing things and having these very interesting moments. And that's something I want to have, that little interestingness that the game did have that I kind of enjoyed. So after replaying RE4 a little bit, that kind of brung up this part of the script of the video. So with Lady D, she does also slowly transform in her dragon form. So there's a mid transformation at one point before you actually get a boss fight with her, which is completely optional. You have the option just to get out of the castle and leave, without killing her, without killing what's called. Now, this way, when you are in the village, Lady D, or I do like the idea that Lady D, if you don't kill anyone, including her, does come out of her castle, and she does stalk you around the village at one brief point. So this way it does emphasize, if you leave her alive, she could be a threat. So I like that little bit, but this would be something that's just a dumb, crazy idea. So moving on to the second section of the game, the Beneviento section. The one section that I honestly don't know if I would change. Now, if Lady D's section is more gothic vampiric horror, and it's historic horror and stuff like that, I like the idea of this, this section being the kind of haunted horror, or the kind of hallucinogens and the very, very psychological horror. And I kind of like that. I don't want to mess with that. So I would honestly tweak this section, but really, I would mostly leave it the same, because it feels very fitting, and it fits within its theme of being the very Silent Hill, very, creepy, haunted type horror that really fits very well. The only change that I would make is, slightly making the section a bit longer, and I would emphasize this, hallucinogen, RE4 beta, kind of influence with Ethan dealing with some hallucinogens and stuff like that, hallucinations, I should say, sorry. And also emphasize this Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger type section. I was rewatching Coraline recently, and I was there was a lot of creepy moments with that, and I wanted to emphasize this doll creepiness that I was genuinely scared, even though it's a kid's movie. It was genuinely scary. And I want to kind of keep that and have like enemy types that are actually in this section besides just fighting the freaking baby, which we are keeping, by the way. But I want more time to really fight, enemies and stuff like that and creep around before you get to that lower section where you have to deal with the baby. I like the idea that you're like trying to search around for a key and giving a little bit more puzzle based instead of just immediately go in, every door's locked, and then you go straight down. I like the idea that you have to like backtrack through this small but little bit big, mansion like thing, and maybe there's a room with, dolls and like there's some creepy needle hands that are moving around, and that would be pretty cool. I like that type of creepiness and to emphasize that because I think that would be an interesting section to mess around with to make it more creepy, more Silent Hill-esque. Because this section was the only part of the game that genuinely scared me. And I want to make it more, and I want to emphasize this like, haunted horror that this section has, like psychological and that type of stuff. I feel like that this is the type of horror that works for this section. I think it fits. This part of the game roughly could stay the same, but I would honestly tweak a few things, but really I would leave it mostly the same. Maybe get some distinct enemies for this section, and also I want to also slightly bring this up. Near the end of the video, I'm going to talk about the enemies and stuff, but the Lycans will be an overwhelming threat through the village and the stuff like that. They will be very advanced, and I like the idea of them riding on horses and stuff like that. I don't like the idea of just having like another zombie or molded. I want something more advanced, like something that RE4 did well that I want to kind of do with this. But I'll talk about that later. After this section, you would have to deal with like a mini boss or a mini thing. The whole section where you deal with Elena, which will have another choice, trying to make sure she jumps, will, make things a little bit harder for you because the grandfather will live as well. So he will be a threat that you would have to deal with and take care of, and Elena might pop back in and finally finish him off. And she might be a separate character. She's pretty much becomes the Zoe of the game, and I feel like we can have her and maybe another character as well, and then you have Chris. So yeah. Then moving on to the third section, which is the Monroe section, where I would have the massive overhaul. There was a lot cut from this section that I want to bring back, and I want to tweak it, because I feel like there's so much that you can really do. After like playing RE4 and just going through that game, it feels like there's so much that you can really do. Like the map in RE4 is very more jointed, especially RE4 Remake, where everything is connected and it's a lot better and a lot more organized, and you can still find stuff, and it's a lot more easier. With Village, it doesn't have that. So when you get to Monroe's section, that's where things are a little bit more unorganized, a little bit more creepier, and a lot more different. The Monroe section is a lot more scarier. This is probably the second scariest part of the game, and I want to emphasize the fear factor with this like aquatic horror, body horror, and like this Jaws type horror. If you watch the movie Jaws, you know that like fear factor of that thing underneath the water type feel, like dun 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 dun. That's the type of stuff I want. I want this to also be a lot more puzzle based, a lot more different, because I do want to add a few cut enemies and a lot of things that were, because this was supposed to be like a fishing village type thing. This is supposed to be a part of the village, but it's the fishing side. And I want to keep that. I want the first part of it would be Monroe looking for dead bodies. And because that was an original plan for RE8, was like a cutscene of that. But I also want to have more of this like horror theme and more of puzzles with this type of section. I want, even with traveling the boat, like something that bothered me with the base game is that in his fish form, he doesn't really attack you. And I want to emphasize even Moreau, the almost Loch Ness monster type character. He's tragic, but he's evil. Like Lord is uniquely evil and scary, and they have a different facet of horror to them. And when you have Monroe's section to play around with that like aquatic horror, the body horror, that that monster under the depth type horror, you can really mess around with that. And that's something I want to emphasize, and that's something I want to do in general. I feel like instead of like making him, the RE4 fish monster in a sense, I want him to distinctly be similar but different in a facet where he's still scary. His section is, very dark in a sense. But moving on from that, let's go to the main, enemies section, where I want to kind of briefly talk about the lichens. Now, there is concept art of showing how they were made, and that's something I do want to keep in the game, that whole scene. And yes, I do want to keep the hag, but I want the lichens to be a more advanced version, in a sense, of the ganados, in a sense. I want these things to really hunt Ethan down. We've had smart enemies, but I want smarter. You have to like think on the fly, and you really have to stay on your toes. And I want to push you in a sense, and in a horror sense, to really, try to survive, even in the village. I want the massacre in the village to be 10 times worse, 10 times scarier, and even basic fights really test your skill and your fight and drive to survive. Because Ethan is not an action, type hero, and he's not going to be roundhousing. He's going to be fighting to survive and fighting to find his daughter. That's it. And I want to kind of emphasize that. And I want the basic enemies, like the lichens, which are already intelligent creatures and people, to really put you to your task. Like the ones in the base game have that a little bit, and they just don't have it in the same way. Like I want them crawling through walls. I want them, attacking you in different directions. And I do want to keep a bit of them really worshiping Miranda and being their slaves, or her slaves in a sense. That she really, uses these things and these type of people that she's, tortured and created into these monsters, in a sense of like using them like pets, and really, emphasizing that. I feel like, these things would be smart. They would try to, like, we have looks at them, and we've had different designs. They use weapons. I want them to track Ethan down, even having this cut one that uses wolves. I want stuff like that. I feel like having them ride on horses. I want that type of feel of like, you're pretty much screwed no matter what you do. But moving on to Heisenberg, my favorite section, I honestly like the factory. I like that there's elements that it's puzzles, it's combat, it's a mixture of stealth at times. I would honestly tweak it a little bit if you if you choose not to join him. But I would emphasize a little bit of some changes, and also make Heisenberg a little bit more scarier, that he could change up the metal of certain sections that sends you back. So like you think you're going to go this way, and the wall starts shaking, and you hear him on the intercoms like, I can see you, and bam, they start to send shards out of your way, and you have to dodge or move around. I want that type of scariness of you're in his realm, and he's the master of it. He's like this Frankenstein's monster Magneto, guy. I want that type of, more to his section than what we got. So imagine if, the metal of the factory, certain sections just start attacking you. Like, for instance, let's say you're going through a path and then the ceiling you start to see everything magnetize. The ceiling starts to turn into shards, and they start to go after you, and you have to run or dodge really quickly to avoid it. I want that. But to follow that up with the key word, I said, if you choose to not join Heisenberg. Now, this would be the final choice of the game that influences not only a DLC that I might talk about in the rewrite of the story video. I might add the DLC as well. But this final choice of the game is something that always bothered me. Heisenberg is probably one of my favorite, villains and antagonists because he's so suave. He's so, shut your damn hole. He has that roughness, that distinct voice, but he also has this fear factor of he's he's creating this army, but they're still vulnerable to Ethan, which is something that bothers me. But I want to kind of change up some of the enemies in his section to emphasize that Frankenstein's monster. And I want this feel of the RE2 remake, where there's more puzzles, but more this distinct feel of you're going through this labyrinth, and he's the master and he controls it. It's something that I felt was a missed opportunity, is you're in a factory. He is proven to control magnetism. He can, hear you through the TVs. What's to stop him from controlling the factory and doing more than just, making Frankenstein monster enemies? I want more distinct stuff with it. I think, the factory's good, but I feel there could have been more. And if you choose to, go against him, it would function the similar way. And let's say Chris is in the building, and there's sections where he does help you, kind of inspired by the rough concept art of Ada that was in the game, even though, she was cut, I think was for the best. But Chris would function like that, and he would actually take that role, I think, throughout the story. But that's the emphasis on the choice. You can also choose to join Heisenberg. Now, this is something that I really like. Now, this is something I really want to do, is have some choices in the game to spare certain enemies or certain characters or antagonists, or kill them. And with Heisenberg, if you basically spared the other lords, he's a little bit annoyed, so he killed them. He killed at least 2 of them. Monroe and Donna. He didn't kill Dimitrescu because he knows that she is probably the trump card. He doesn't like her, but he knows he can use her. And the thing is, not just that, but also you can, if you do kill them, the game changes in a sense. I like that emphasis on a choice. And if you choose to join Heisenberg, and if Ethan dies, it influences things. And, you still run into Chris, but Ethan, Heisenberg will let you know that Chris isn't the bad guy. And what's her name isn't dead. Your wife's not dead. She's captive, just like your daughter. Now, you can either man the fuck up and go help, save her, or you can die. And I feel some elements I might explore that in a rewrite, but having Heisenberg have more complexity if you join or not join, his section will slightly change, but it would be awesome if they would have emphasized you're in someone else's territory. You're, it's like, in wars, in a sense, stuff like that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like this video, comment if you're new, and also let me know what you think about some of the ideas that I shared in the video. And also, if you haven't already, check out some of the other, stuff on the channel. So I have done videos on Devil May Cry. I really love that series. And also, if you want updates for videos like these, check out my main channel or my social media stuff that's linked on the main channel, where I might post updates for, stuff like that. So you're never going to miss that. And make sure to hit the bell icon and all that. But peace out. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye-bye.